So last week, I started the sermon by saying God has a twisted sense of humor. Remember those 3,000 new members when we were taking in 2 and I thought that was something to brag about? Well, turns out I can start this week's sermon by saying exactly the same thing. God has a twisted sense of humor. This time, it's because of what we find in the gospel lesson from John 14, which is actually part of a very long speech that Jesus gives to his disciples in his last days and hours before he's arrested and crucified. It's called the Farewell Discourse in the Gospel of John. Most of it only appears in the Gospel of John. It's not in the Synoptic Gospels at all, Matthew, Mark, or Luke. And what is so funny, sort of, about what we find in this passage I just read to you is namely what we find in verse 2 and in verse 6. In the lesson, they're only separated by 3 short little verses, these 2 phrases. In my Father's house there are many mansions, or in a newer translation, many dwelling places. That's verse 2. And verse 6, no one comes to the Father except through me. These 2 phrases, uttered by Jesus practically in the same breath, have been used as ammunition by opposing sides in a church fight that has been raging for centuries. In this corner, weighing in at 14'6", winner of the Bible Belt, with 316 knockouts, wearing the red trunks, it's Jerry Turn or Burn King. And at that point the crowd will shout, it's only Jesus, it's only Jesus, it's only Jesus. In this corner over here, we've got weighing in at 14'2", with no wins, no losses, and 142 ties, because really, isn't everyone a champion? Wearing the blue trunks, it's Calvin Kumbaya McGee. And the crowd chants, many mansions, many mansions. Let's get ready to rumble. Yes, in the blue corner, it's those who point to verse 14:2, where Jesus talks about all those many mansions, all those dwelling places, as a favorite proof text for arguing that Hindus and Buddhists and Muslims and Jews all will dwell alongside Christians in the hereafter. If there are many mansions in God's kingdom, after all, it means there are places for people of all faiths and all backgrounds in the divine home. Which reminds me of an old joke that you've probably heard before. Seems this man died, and he was ushered into heaven, which appeared to him to be like this giant house. And an angel started escorting him down long hallways with many rooms on either side. What's in that room over there? The man asked, pointing to where a very somber-looking group of people were chanting Gregorian chants. He said, oh, those are the Roman Catholics, very high church. They went a little further and he said, what's in that room over there? And there were a group of half-naked people just gyrating all around and shrieking out loud. And he said, oh, those are the Balinese, very lively. A little bit further on, well, what's in that room over there? There were a bunch of bald people meditating to the sound of this gong. That's the Zen group. They're very quiet. You'll hardly know they're here. And then they stopped. And the angel said to the man, the next room we're going to pass, I got to ask you to tiptoe. They cannot hear a sound. They can't know we're here. And he said, well, why? Well, I'll tell you what. In that room, there's a bunch of fundamentalist Christians, and they think they're the only ones here. In the church battle royale, this joke clearly takes the side of, if there's many rooms in my Father's house, as it says in 14:2 of John, that's proof that there's room for everyone. From the high church Catholics, to the gyrating Balinese, to the gonging Zen Buddhists, and even those fundamentalist Christians who think they're the only ones there. And it's those fundamentalist folks, by the way, who use just 3 verses later, verse 6, as their proof text to say that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Many Christian conservatives have used those lines to proclaim that Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation, insisting that everyone must accept Jesus as Lord or be damned to hell for all eternity. How on earth can those 2 verses One apparently saying everybody's included in the kingdom of God, and the other one apparently saying everybody's out except for the Christians. How can they be found back to back in the very same gospel lesson, in the very same speech by Jesus? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, and I told Marilyn and Peggy this already. I always open the lectionary guide when I get home from here on Sunday afternoons, just to see what my sermon prep's going to look like for the week ahead. Say a little prayer, please, Jesus, let me preach this text before, and I have an old sermon I can use again. Not the case this week. And when I looked, and when I saw that it was John 14, I wanted to avoid preaching about this text with everything in my being. So I kept looking at that lesson from Acts and that lesson from 1 Peter that Dory read to you, thinking there's got to be something in there that I can talk about. But my conscience, and guilt and shame are hobbies of mine, so it's no surprise. My conscience kept dragging me back to John, saying, you are a coward if you do not say something about this. I couldn't imagine reading that lesson out loud to you as I just did, leaving those words hanging in the air over your heads, and then turn around and talk about something totally different. It was a chicken way out. So I gritted my teeth and girded my loins, and I prepared to wrestle with John 14. I'll be honest with you that for me, my discomfort with this text comes from the fact that I don't personally believe Christianity is the only pathway to God or salvation. Even though I'm also going to be honest with you and tell you it's the only way for me. I, along with most mainline Christians these days, find that taking that verse literally and defining it narrowly is really troubling. In part it's because it's been used as a weapon to bludgeon people of other faiths into theological submission. It's become what many refer to as a bully text. The Bible says, no one comes to God except through Jesus. Boom, discussion over, drop the mic, we're done. And that doesn't sound like good news or gospel preaching to me. Now, along with many mainline biblical scholars today, I find that a literal, narrow reading is also troubling because it just doesn't line up with everything else you find in the New Testament. For example, just a couple weeks ago, we heard from the 10th chapter of Acts, where it says, in every nation, anyone who fears God and does what is right is acceptable to God. Okay? Or how about the fact that Jesus uses the example of a religious outsider to his own tradition, a hated Samaritan, to describe a true neighbor, when he's trying to explain what the two most important commandments in all of God's law are. If he really thought that his religious way was the only way, why would he have ever told a parable starring the Good Samaritan? And we can't forget that every time he turned around, Jesus was inviting the most out there people to sit down at a table with him and eat a meal. Romans, tax collectors, prostitutes, every outsider he could find, he invited to sit down with him. So the way I read the New Testament, it's not the way everybody reads it, and I'm okay with that. Jesus had open arms, not closed arms. Universal love seems to be, to me anyways, at the center of his gospel is good news, not a bunch of restricted dogmatic demands. So it's probably no surprise to you that I had a hard time with John 14:6. But as the week went by, and I sat with this text, and I read it, and I prayed about it, and I tried to write about it, I realized that because I take the Bible seriously, even if I don't take it literally, I take it seriously. I needed to take this verse seriously too. Not just ignore it and keep turning the pages in my Bible till I find something that makes me feel a lot better. And I do take biblical authority very seriously. I hope you know that. I take it so seriously, in fact, that I try with everything I have not to take passages out of their literary or their historical or their cultural context so I can make them mean what I want them to mean. It's tempting. And I know I do it sometimes despite my best intentions, but I try not to. And once I put John 14:6 back into those contexts, the literature form, the form of literature it's in, the history and the culture it comes out of, I realized I had been misunderstanding it, and so have a lot of other people. I've misunderstood what it is and what it isn't saying. For starters, it's important to remember that these verses, all of the verses we heard from John 14, are part of his farewell speeches, spoken to his absolutely closest disciples behind closed doors. These were not public speeches. In the days and the very hours leading up to his arrest, betrayal, and crucifixion. He knows, certainly in the Gospel of John, of all four Gospels, that Jesus of John knows what's coming. He knows what's about to happen. And he's trying to prepare his disciples for that awful event that they're going to have to watch. He's trying, I think, to comfort them, to reassure them in their fear and their grief, to encourage them to have hope and faith, and also to give them their marching orders for once he's gone. That means these verses are part of a very intimate, intense, personal conversation that was held at a specific time for a specific reason. Next, if you look at the story, you'll notice that there are some important words that people often leave out when they quote verse 6, when they're trying to prove Christianity is the only way to God. Most often you will hear people say either, Jesus said, no one comes to me but through the Father, or they'll say, the Bible says, Bible says no one comes to the Father except through Jesus. If you blink, you miss it, because it's two little words. The Bible does not say, Jesus said no one comes to the Father. The Bible actually says, Jesus said to him. Jesus said to him, no one comes to the Father. Who is him? It's Thomas. Jesus is answering a very specific question that Thomas just asked him. And I guarantee you can look in your Bible right now if you want to. The question that Thomas asked Jesus is not, hey Jesus, what about all those non-Christians? They're going to go to hell, right? That isn't what he asks him. Thomas's question, as a grief-stricken friend who's just learned that his leader, his mentor, his Savior is about to die, was this: Lord, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus' answer is meant to comfort him in that moment because he's upset. Jesus says, don't let your heart be troubled, Thomas. You can know the way because you already know me. I'm the way. He's not trying to hit him over the head and say, this is what you've got to believe. He's saying, it's okay. It's all right. Because you know me, you'll find your way. Everyone who comes to the Father does so by following the way of truth and life. I'm sorry, I don't know what's so weepy. Because I had 4 hours of sleep, that's why. I read this sermon for the life of me, and this stupid puppy kept barking at me. I'm so tired. I will be taking a nap for my Mother's Day gift this morning. I'll never take naps. So anyways, Jesus isn't responding to a question about people of other faiths. The writer of the Gospel of John wasn't focused on the question of non-Christians going to heaven or hell. He isn't making some sweeping claim, because let's not forget, there was no Christianity yet. When he wrote that letter, they were this itsy bitsy tiny little community inside a synagogue. They were still Jews. So it's not like saying, well, and plus, they hadn't met a Buddhist, they hadn't met a Hindu, I can guarantee you, and Islam didn't come along for another 600 years, so I'm pretty sure they hadn't met a Muslim either. It isn't what John was worried about as he wrote this part of his gospel. If there's any hint, and in all honesty, there might be a little hint of John trying to say Christianity is superior, remember what I've been telling you about John these past few months. They were in a fight with that synagogue. It was ugly, they were getting kicked out, they were getting persecuted, and they were getting shunned in their little town. It was not pretty. And so, John might have been saying, nobody comes to the Father except through Jesus, as a way of saying, quit picking on us, we're right and you're wrong. And that's kind of human nature, and you can understand that. But more important, than any of this. What Jesus or the Gospel of John aren't saying, what's more important is what they are saying. The whole passage began with Jesus saying, don't let your hearts be troubled. We aren't supposed to worry and fret about who's in and who's out, and who's getting into heaven and who's going to hell. A very wise mom once said to her daughter, who came home from school and said, my friend is a Hindu. Doesn't that mean if she doesn't believe in Jesus, she's going to go to hell one day? Her mother turned to her and said, Annie, Christianity is not a club. It's not about who's in and out. It's about how we live. It's about how we live, which is exactly what Jesus' point is when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. A way is a path. A way is a road to be followed. A way is not a set of beliefs. And what is Jesus' way in John's gospel, or all the other gospels for that matter? From the beginning, Jesus' way is the path of death and resurrection. The path of dying to what was and being born anew into what will be. And it's the only way to God. Jesus is what the way looks like when it's in a body, in a human life. It's not a set of beliefs about Jesus. It's a way of life. That people ever thought what he was trying to say there was about doctrine or a list of beliefs you have to accept is odd. As if the only people who can be saved are people who know how to say the word Jesus. Marcus Borg, who is a theologian that sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but a great guy, said, that amounts to salvation by syllables. I love that. And that's not what God's about. It certainly wasn't what Jesus was about. It's also interesting, by the way, a whole nother sermon, to note that most of the enduring world religions have this idea of dying to yourself, dying to what has been, and being born again to what is new. But for us as Christians, that's why we're here today, to talk to each other and support each other in our Christian faith. For us as Christians, Jesus embodies the way of dying and rising, of laying down the old life for the new, giving up of an old identity and way of life in order to receive your new identity and a new way of life in Christ. Jesus is the way. Now, that sounds great, but we can't forget that dying and rising like that, it's got consequences. Because you're not unchanged after it happens to you, and you probably all know that. It's a way of inner transformation that reconnects us to God, and Marcus Borg wrote about this fact. It's the life of the returned prodigal in that wonderful parable who's welcomed home from exile. Think about how his life would never be the same after that. The life of the healed demoniac who was restored to his right mind and got welcomed back into his community. The life of the woman who was bent over, but suddenly, because of Jesus, was able to stand up and was restored to health. The life of a woman in the streets, redeemed by her love. The life of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead. It's a life marked by freedom and joy and justice and peace and love. The love of God for us and the love of God in us. So from now on, when we hear this familiar text from John's Gospel, Jesus said to him, don't forget to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I think we should apply, and I'm so impressed that I get to use my 8th grade algebra, I never thought I would, the transitive property. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's the transitive property. So if Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, you can say, Jesus also said, no one comes to the Father except by the way, the truth, and the life. That makes a lot more sense to me. I'm way, whatever, it's what I'm more comfortable with, but I hope it makes more sense to some of you as well. Hearing it that way, we no longer need to ask ourselves, does this mean I'm going to heaven? Does this mean she's not? Instead, we ask ourselves, how has Jesus' transformation of me taken form in my own life? To what of the old have I just died? Or what do I need to die to that I haven't yet from the old in order to experience the new life that God is giving me? That's the path to God, and that's the way, capital W. Jesus leaves us this morning not only with words of comfort, but also challenge. If you were paying attention at the end of that gospel lesson, it's pretty clear. Because once we've examined our own lives, seeking to die to the old and rise to the new, we hear him calling us in those last few verses of the passage. He's calling us forward, and it's into action. Very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these. That is a tall order. It will take all of our time, energy, love, courage to fill that tall order, I think. Doing the work that Jesus did, think about it, bringing good news to the poor, proclaiming release to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, letting the oppressed go free. That's a pretty big to-do list. Oh darn, I'm afraid we just won't have any time left to sit around worrying whose religion is right, whose religion is wrong, and who's getting into heaven, and who's on the path to hell. And thanks be to God for that.